So we're going to be looking at various ways that you can remove and replace things in images and to heal things over that you might want to improve on. So we're going to look first of all at these tools here, sometimes called the makeover tools or the healing tools. And we'll start with the spot healing brush tool. So if I choose that one, you can see it's a brush. So if I zoom in here, you can see in the sky, I've got these birds. Now, they don't really read that well, so I might want to get rid of them. So I can change my brush size with my square brackets. So make sure your brush is a bit bigger than what you want to remove. And I've set the brush to quite soft, but I'm going to harden it up a little bit, maybe around about 50%. And then I'm just going to click. And you'll see that it heals over that area. It's a destructive process, so it is permanently changing those pixels. I'm going to change to this image, and these are obviously temporary acne marks. They're not permanent, they're not like her freckles or anything like that, so it's quite fine to get rid of them. I'm going to bring the brush size down, and then just by clicking, I can just improve the quality of her skin there. I don't want to get rid of her freckles because those are natural. Okay, so spot healing brush, it doesn't necessarily have to be spots on a person. It can be specks on an image and all sorts of other things. Okay, let's have a look at the healing brush tool. So I'm going to go to this image here. And this person has quite heavy shading under her eyes, making her skin under her eyes look quite severe. So we don't want to remove that because that's going to look fake, but we just want to lessen the harshness of it. So the first step I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the healing brush tool. And what I want to do is I want to take some of this smoother skin on her cheek and I want to just brush it underneath her eyes to heal over that area first, and then I'm going to paint them back, but softer. So I'm going to hold down Option or Alt and click to set my source. So I'm going to take from this area, so I've clicked to set my source. Square brackets to set your brush size, and I've got a soft brush, and I'm just going to brush here, and just remember that it's taking from this area, so you can't do long brush strokes, otherwise you're going to start painting in nostrils. So you just want to paint short little bits here. Okay. And I don't have to take from this cheek, I can continue from that source there on this side. Okay, that went too far there. All right, so I know that looks horrendous, but essentially this is the first phase, is to remove the area that we want to fix. And now we're going to use a special tool called the history brush tool. So here it is here, history brush tool. And we're going to go to our history panel and make sure that the history brush is set to the top, which is the way this image was when we opened it. And what we're now going to do is brush back her under eye skin, but we're going to do it much softer with a lower opacity. So up at the top here for the history brush tool, I've got an opacity of 20, and I'm just going to a couple of times, maybe a little bit more. Okay. So if I do in my history panel, if I do a snapshot of that, and then I go between the beginning, when we open the image, and afterwards, you can see that there's a definite improvement in the shadows and the harshness of the skin under her eyes. Okay, so that's using the patch tool. Next, we're going to look at not the patch tool, that was the brush tool, the healing, forgotten the name, what is it? The healing brush tool, that's it. We've got this image with a tattoo, and we're going to use something called a patch tool here. So we're going to go to patch tool and drag a patch around the tattoo and drag to a piece of clean skin. And when we release, it's going to heal over. Now I'm going to undo it and do it again. I want to try and match things up a bit better. And then deselect. Okay, so it's done an okay job, not a fantastic job, but it's acceptable. If you made the brush a bit softer and tried a few different options, you might get a better result. But you can see that the patch tool is basically selecting and dragging over another area to combine those pixels and to heal over. So that's the patch tool. What are we looking at next? Content aware move. So let's go to this image here. So if I make a selection with my lasso tool, I'm just going to select the bird, but I'm going to select quite a bit of the grass as well. Okay, and then I'm going to go to the content aware move tool, make sure it's on move, and then drag the bird across here and press enter. And it's going to deselect, it's going to move the bird, and it's going to heal over where it was. This is a destructive process. I would never do this, but if you just want a very quick way of moving something from one place to another, this is how to do it. I would do it in a non-destructive way by doing a decent selection and healing over the area and having it in a different layer. But this is kind of a quick fix. On the same tool, if I go to this lotus pond image, if I wanted to extend the width of this image, what I don't want to do is this, because that is going to stretch the image. So what I'm rather going to do is make a selection with my rectangular marquee between these two guides, and then go to my content aware move tool and change it to extend, and then drag this selection across, and when I press enter, it's going to heal over where the join is there. Now this is kind of the old way of doing it. There of course is generative ways of doing this now, which is much more effective, but if you don't have access to the generative tools, or maybe you're not online, this is one way that you can extend an image. All right, red eye, let's have a look at that. So red eye is not that common anymore. Most cameras actually will get rid of red eye automatically. But if you do have an image with red eye as a result of the use of a flash, this is the only example I could find online. It's a very low quality image. There is a red eye tool. So if I take the red eye tool and I just drag over each eye, you can see that it neutralizes that red eye and fixes it. So it does a fairly good job if ever you have that problem. All right, let's go to content aware fill. So I have this photo and there's this dustbin right in the middle here, and it's kind of ruining the image. So if I wanted to remove this dustbin, there are a number of ways that I can do it. So one way is to make a selection. So I'm going to use my lasso tool and I'm just going to select around the dustbin and also the shadow of the dustbin. And then I'm going to go to Edit, Content Aware Fill. And it's going to open up here and it's going to show me the results. And what it's doing is it's using these green areas to help it understand how to fill in those pixels. It's done an okay job. And I can add or subtract from these areas to let it recalculate to get a better or a different result. I'm just going to leave it as it is and say okay. So it's kind of okay, but not really. We can see that things are a bit wonky here. And you'll see that it's on a new layer like that. So it's done non-destructively. So content aware fill is something you can use, but there's better generative ways of doing it now. So I'm just going to undo that and deselect. And I'm going to rather use a special tool up here called the remove tool. So if I choose the remove tool and I actually paint over this dustbin and the shadow, when I release, it's going to read the pixels around there and it's going to fix it. And it's using basically machine learning. So it's done a fantastic job. My only complaint with this is that it's destructive. It actually hasn't created a new layer with what I want in there. So that's one way. I'm going to undo that. Another way is to make your selection with your whatever selection tool you need to use. I'm using the lasso tool here. And then down the bottom here on your context bar, it says remove. And if I click on that, now you can see it's dialing up to the mothership because this is using generative AI. It's obviously going to take a little while. All right, so it's done a pretty good job, but it's done it non-destructively this time. In other words, on a new layer, which is great. Okay, so that's using remove from the context bar. I'm just going to delete that layer. And there's another way of doing it, which is generative fill. So if I just make a selection, I'm going to make a very crude selection just for the rectangle, and I'm just going to say generative fill, generate. It's kind of the same as using remove, and you're going to get a very similar result. Okay, and it's given me 3 options here that I can choose from. I think number 1 is probably the best one. And you can see it's non-destructive in that it's done it in another layer. And this would probably be the method that I would use these days to get rid of something like that. The remove tool is pretty useful for things like if I just wanted to get rid of this light pole here. Well, it's actually not a light pole, it's a Loudhailer pole. That would be a good candidate for the remove tool. Whoa. Okay, I was on the wrong layer, so that's why I did a rubbish job. I'm on the right layer now. Let me do it again. Okay, done an excellent job. All right, and then the last thing is, what if you want to generate something new? In other words, not get rid of something, but add something. So this is a controversial part of generative AI because of intellectual property issues around photography and stuff like that. But let's just see how you would do it. So if I wanted a hot air balloon in the sky here, I could draw a rectangle, and then under generative fill, could say hot air balloon and generate. Okay, that looks not so good. Okay, I think that's a much better option there. So it gives you some options. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of generating images like this. I think that I'm a believer in the saying effort has value, and this requires very little effort, and so it has no value. But if that were my photo and my balloon that I photographed and I photoshopped it in here, it would have more value because it took effort and it took skill and craft. But these are some of the tools available to you to be able to remove and heal stuff in photographs, and give it a try and take some of your photographs and see what you can do with them.